Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into our most uncomfortable clothes and walking willingly into one of the most terrifying social arenas in human history, the Victorian dinner party. Not the warm, candlelit fantasy from your favourite period drama, where everyone is charming, the wine flows freely, and the worst thing that happens is a longing glance across the table. No, I mean the real thing. A 4-hour ordeal of 40 pieces of silverware, a corset quietly relocating your internal organs, and roughly 900 unspoken rules, any one of which you can break and instantly become the scandal of the season. It's like a job interview, a wedding, and a minefield, all served on fine china. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And a heartfelt thank you to the listener who suggested tonight's topic. Your ideas are the whole reason this strange little corner of history keeps growing, and I never take that for granted. If you'd rather drift off with just your ears, the channel is now on Spotify too, and the link is waiting for you down in the description. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, get comfortable, and maybe loosen your own belt a notch in solidarity with what's coming. Let's pause for a moment and wonder a few things. Have you ever sat at a work dinner staring at 3 forks, quietly sweating about which one is actually yours? Have you ever smiled through an entire evening while an outfit slowly tried to murder you? Have you ever been trapped beside someone at a table for 2 hours with no exit route and no phone to hide behind? Could you survive a meal where chewing too loudly might end your family's reputation? Would you last a single night with nothing to protect you but your posture and the merciless judgment of strangers in expensive gloves? And now, congratulations, a stiff cream-coloured card has just arrived on a silver tray. The year is 1874. You've been invited to dinner, and refusing is not really an option. May the cutlery have mercy on your soul. Let's start where every Victorian nightmare begins, with a polite little piece of paper. The invitation arrives on a silver tray written in elegant looping handwriting on thick cream card, and it looks perfectly harmless. It is not. This card is a summons, a test, and a trap all at once, and the moment it touches your fingers, the rules quietly switch on. You have a narrow window to reply. You must reply in the third person, in precisely the same formal style, and you must not make a single error, because a clumsy response tells the entire household exactly what they suspected, that you are, to put it gently, not quite the right sort. The invitation isn't just an offer of food, it's a verdict. Someone, somewhere, sat down with a list and decided you were worth feeding. That sounds flattering until you realise the same list is a ranking, and your name's position on it tells the host secretary exactly how much trouble to take over you. Arrive on the list at all, and you've passed an audit you never knew you were sitting. The card itself is engineered to intimidate. The paper is heavy enough to feel expensive. The ink is flawless, and the phrasing is so stiff and ceremonial that it reads less like a friendly note and more like a court summons with better manners. You hold this little rectangle of doom and feel the weight of everything it implies. You will need a free evening. You will need the correct clothes, which you may not own. You will need to remember which fork does what, which you definitely don't. And you will need to spend the next several days quietly panicking while pretending to be delighted. It's the 1870s equivalent of seeing We Need to Talk arrive with no further context, except it's printed on cardstock and delivered by a servant who waits to see your reaction. There's a cruel little detail here too. The invitation usually arrives with only a week or 2 of warning, sometimes less, which feels generous until you remember how long it takes to prepare. There are no quick fixes in this world. You cannot simply order something to wear or rinse off and show up. Everything must be arranged, fitted, cleaned and rehearsed. That short notice isn't carelessness. It's a quiet flex. Proper people are assumed to be ready for anything at any moment, with the wardrobe and the manners already in place. If you're scrambling, well, that's rather the point. And refusing? Technically possible, socially catastrophic. A declined invitation, unless backed by genuine illness or a death in the family, is read as a snub, and snubs are remembered with the tenderness of a grudge passed down through generations. You don't turn down dinner, you survive it. So you sit there, card in hand, the faint smell of expensive ink in the air, your stomach already sinking, and you understand that your evening, your week, and possibly your social standing now hinge on how well you eat soup in front of strangers. You set the invitation down carefully, as though it might bite. In a sense, it already has. Somewhere across town a hostess is reviewing her seating plan, a cook is sharpening her ambitions, and a small army of servants is preparing to watch you fail in real time. You haven't even replied yet, and you're already losing. Welcome to the Victorian dinner party, where the suffering begins the moment the paper touches your palm. So you've decided to accept, which was never truly optional, and now you face the second hurdle, writing back. You'd think saying yes, I'll be there, would be simple. You'd be wrong. There is a correct grammar to gratitude here. A rigid little dance of Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so request the pleasure answered by have much pleasure in accepting, all written as though you are referring to two other people entirely. Get the wording right and you're invisible, which is the goal. Get it wrong and your card becomes a quiet item of gossip passed between housekeepers. The third-person business alone is enough to break a sweat. You do not write, I would love to come. You write about yourself as though you're a distant acquaintance you barely know, referring to Mr. Such and Such accepting the kind invitation of your hosts, and you must mirror the exact tone of the card you received. It's like being asked to reply to an email by composing a formal legal document about a stranger who happens to share your name. One stray casual phrase, one warm little flourish that slips into the wrong register, and you've revealed that you don't quite know the steps. Timing matters as much as wording. You reply promptly, ideally within a day, because dithering suggests you are weighing better offers, which is unthinkable. But you also don't fire back a response so instantly that you seem desperate, like the person who replies to a text before the screen has finished lighting up. There's a sweet spot of attentive but dignified, and you're expected to find it without anyone ever telling you it exists. Everyone simply knows, and you're simply assumed to know, and the not knowing is the very thing that exposes you. Then there's the paper. Yes, your reply has standards too. The card should be of decent quality, the handwriting neat and legible, the ink unsmudged. A blotted, hurried scrawl on flimsy stock whispers things about your household you'd rather not have whispered. In a world without screens, your handwriting is your voice, and a shaky, careless hand suggests either poor breeding or a tremor of nerves, neither of which helps your cause. You may find yourself writing the thing out 3 times to get a clean copy, hunched over a desk like a schoolchild redoing an assignment. And heaven help you if there's a complication. What if you can attend but your spouse cannot? What if you must decline after accepting? Each scenario has its own delicate protocol, its own correct phrasing, its own potential for catastrophe. A late cancellation is especially perilous because it leaves your hosts with an uneven table, which throws off the careful pairing of guests and forces a frantic last-minute reshuffle. Cancel without an excellent reason, and you've not just disappointed people, you've damaged their evening's architecture, and they will not forget who pulled out the supporting beam. When at last you've produced a flawless little reply, sealed it, and sent it on its way, you might feel a flicker of relief. Don't. All you've done is confirm your attendance at your own trial. The reply is simply the paperwork. Somewhere across town, your acceptance is being ticked off a list. slotting you into a seating plan you'll have no say in, beside a person you haven't met, in an order determined by people who've already decided where you rank. You've cleared the first written exam of the evening. There are unfortunately several thousand unwritten ones still to come, and the next one is waiting in your own wardrobe. With the date looming, your real suffering begins, and it begins in your own bedroom. Dressing for a Victorian dinner is not a matter of throwing on something nice. It is a logistical campaign requiring time, help, and a high pain threshold. If you're a gentleman, you're climbing into the rigid uniform of the evening, a black tailcoat, a stiff white shirt that could deflect a letter opener, and a collar engineered to hold your chin at a permanent angle of mild disapproval. If you're a lady, well, sit down. Actually, don't. You won't be sitting comfortably for the rest of the night. For the gentleman, the look is deceptively simple and quietly merciless. The shirt front is starched into a board so stiff it crackles when you move. The collar saws gently at your jaw, and the white bow tie must be tied by hand to exactly the right shape, which is harder than it sounds when your fingers are nervous and the mirror is dim. There are studs and cufflinks to fasten, a waistcoat to button, gloves to manage. Everything is white where it should be white and black where it should be black, and any deviation, a coloured tie, a soft collar, the wrong waistcoat, marks you instantly as a man who doesn't understand the occasion. It's a uniform precisely so that no one can stand out, and standing out is the worst thing you can do. For the ladies, the campaign is longer, heavier, and frankly requires reinforcements. You do not dress alone, you cannot. A maid is essential because half the fastenings are located in places your own arms simply cannot reach, a design choice that quietly assumes you have staff. The evening gown is an elaborate construction of fabric, often low at the shoulders, trailing at the back, layered and trimmed and weighed down with detail. Beneath it sit petticoats, underthings, and the corset, which deserves and will shortly receive its own grim discussion. Then come the gloves, long and snug, the jewellery, the carefully arranged hair, every piece adding another quarter hour to the operation. The hair alone is its own ordeal. It must be dressed, pinned, and shaped into something elaborate and fashionable. A process that takes time, patience, and a small armoury of pins that will spend the entire evening threatening to migrate. One loose strand, one sagging curl, and the whole carefully built effect begins to look careless, which in this world reads as a moral failing. You sit very still while it's assembled, breathing shallowly, already aware that the next several hours will be spent protecting this fragile architecture from collapse. And here's the maddening part. All of this effort is in service of looking effortless. The goal is to appear as though you simply woke up impeccable, as though the gown, the hair, the gloves, and the agonizing collar all assembled themselves around your natural elegance. No one must see the work. No one must witness the maid bracing against your back or the gentleman wrestling his tie for the 4th time. The labour is hidden so that the result can look like grace. It's the original version of an outfit that took 2 hours to make look thrown together. By the time you're finally dressed, you've burned the better part of an afternoon, recruited at least one other human being, and squeezed yourself into clothing engineered for posture rather than comfort. You catch your reflection in the glass, polished, rigid, faintly alarmed. You look magnificent. You can barely move, and you haven't even reached the part where breathing becomes optional. Let's talk about the corset because it deserves its own moment of horror. This is not a gentle bit of shapewear. It's a structured cage of whalebone and laces, tightened by another human being who braces a knee against your spine and pulls. The goal is a fashionable silhouette. The side effect is that deep breathing becomes a quaint memory, and bending over becomes a genuine risk to life. By the time you're laced in, you've achieved an elegant figure and surrendered roughly half your lung capacity. You will spend the entire evening eating rich food while physically unable to fully inhale. What could possibly go wrong? The construction itself is a marvel of stubborn engineering. Stiffened with strips of whalebone, sometimes steel, the corset is built to mould the torso into a shape the body did not consent to. The laces run up the back, which means you genuinely cannot do this yourself. You need a second pair of hands, and those hands are not gentle. The tightening is a process, a gradual cinching, a steady pull while you grip something solid and try not to think about it. There's a particular sound the laces make, a soft creaking strain that you'll come to associate with the words almost there, which are always a lie. Once it's on, your whole way of being changes. You sit upright because you have no choice. Slouching is no longer physically available to you. You take small, shallow breaths because large ones simply aren't on offer. You move carefully, deliberately, because sudden motion meets resistance, and bending at the waist is a negotiation you will lose. In a strange way, the corset does half the work of Victorian manners for you. It's hard to slump rudely or lunge across the table when your own undergarments are holding you at attention, like a strict invisible governess. Now layer on the evening ahead. You're going to a dinner of 8, 10, perhaps more courses, each one rich, heavy, and generous. You're going to be seated in a warm room for hours. You're going to drink several glasses of wine. And you're going to do all of this while wearing a device specifically designed to compress the exact region of your body that food and breath need most. The mathematics here are not in your favour. Eat too much and you feel it instantly. A tightening squeeze that turns the 9th course into a quiet endurance test. Eat too little and you're being rude. There is no winning, only managing. This is, of course, why fainting became such a celebrated Victorian pastime. It wasn't always delicate emotion or shock at scandalous news. Often it was simple physics, restricted breathing, a warm crowded room, a heavy meal, and a body that had finally had enough and chose to opt out for a moment. A lady swooning at dinner was so common, it was practically built into the schedule. Hosts kept smelling salts on hand. It was less a crisis and more a recognised feature of the evening, like an intermission no one planned but everyone expected. So you stand there, laced and rigid, and faintly light-headed before you've even left the house, your ribs gently reminding you that they had other plans. You look the part. Your figure is the height of fashion, and you've made a quiet bargain with the evening. In exchange for elegance, you've handed over your ability to breathe comfortably, eat freely, or move like a person. You take one careful, shallow breath, lift your chin, and prepare to leave, because the carriage is waiting, and the timing of your arrival is yet another way to ruin everything. Now properly dressed and quietly suffocating, you climb into a carriage and head off, and here lies another invisible trap. Timing. Arrive too early and you've caught your hosts mid-panic, which is mortifying for everyone. Arrive late and you've insulted the entire party, because dinner waits for no one, and a delayed guest throws the whole carefully built machine off its rails. The sweet spot is a window of perhaps 15 minutes, threaded between rudeness and chaos. You'll spend the carriage ride doing mental arithmetic about traffic and horses, all so you can walk through a door at a socially flawless moment. Consider the disaster of arriving early. The proper hour has not yet come. The hosts are still making final adjustments. The cook is at war in the kitchen, and the drawing room is not yet ready to receive anyone. Walking in ahead of time forces your hostess to stop mid-preparation and entertain you, which is its own small humiliation for her and a glaring sign of poor judgment from you. Being early isn't eager, it's intrusive. You've essentially shown up to someone's house while they're still hiding the clutter, except the clutter is the entire elaborate illusion of effortless hospitality. Now consider arriving late, which is somehow worse. Victorian dinners run on a schedule because the food runs on a schedule. A grand meal of many courses, much of it timed to be served at its peak, cannot simply wait while one missing guest dawdles across town. Worse still, the whole party is often expected to go into dinner together in a careful procession, paired and ranked, which means a single absent guest holds everyone hostage in the drawing room, making polite conversation grow thinner by the minute while the soup quietly congeals. You don't just inconvenience the hosts, you inconvenience every single person there, all of whom now know your name and exactly why they're still standing. So you aim for that narrow, blessed window, a few minutes after the appointed hour, early enough to be present and composed, late enough that the hosts are ready to greet you properly. The trouble is, in the 1870s, you have almost no control over the variables. Your transport is a horse, an animal with opinions. The roads are unpredictable. There's no way to send word ahead that you're running behind, no quick message to smooth things over. You simply have to plan, leave with a buffer, and pray. This is why the wise guest builds in time and then waits. It's entirely normal to find yourself arriving in the neighbourhood early and quite deliberately stalling, having the driver slow the pace or take a turn around a nearby square, all to avoid the shame of being first through the door. Picture it, you, laced into your finest, sitting in a carriage going nowhere in particular, killing minutes, watching the light, timing your grand entrance with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. The 1870s version of circling the block because you pulled up to the restaurant 8 minutes too soon. When the moment finally comes, you alight, smooth your clothing, take the shallowest breath your corset permits, and approach the door. Behind it lies warmth, light, and a room full of people primed to judge the manner of your entrance. You've solved the timing. You've threaded the needle between intrusive and insulting. And your reward naturally is to walk straight into the next test, where a servant will announce your name to a room of strangers, and you'll be expected to perform delight while your heart hammers against the whalebone. The door opens. Here we go. You step inside, hand over your coat, and are announced, yes, announced, by a servant calling your name into a room of strangers as though you're competing for a prize. Then comes the greeting of your hosts, a small ceremony of bows, handshakes, and exactly the right amount of warmth. Too cold and you're aloof, too eager and you're desperate. You must perform delight at being here, even though you can barely breathe and you've already forgotten which fork does what. And the smile you fix to your face right now, you will be wearing that same smile for the next 4 hours. The announcement alone is enough to rattle you. A servant takes your name and projects it into the room, and suddenly every head turns, every eye lands, and you're on display before you've taken 3 steps. There's no quiet slipping in, no lingering by the door to gather yourself. You're introduced into the gathering like an act walking on stage, and the audience, polished and seated and sipping, gets its first look at you. You feel the warmth of the room hit you, the scent of candle wax and perfume and roasting meat drifting from somewhere deeper in the house, and you understand that the performance has already begun. Then you reach your hosts, and the precise choreography of greeting kicks in. There's a correct way to bow, a correct hand to offer, a correct degree of enthusiasm. You express your pleasure at being invited, your gratitude, your delight, all in measured tones, because gushing is vulgar and coolness is insulting. The handshake, if there is one, is firm but brief. The words are warm but contained. It's a tiny ritual performed thousands of times across the season, and everyone present can tell in an instant whether you've done it smoothly or fumbled it like a man greeting his bank manager. The cruelty is in the subtlety. No one will correct you. No one will say, Ah, you bowed a touch too deeply there, or that was rather over-warm, wasn't it? The judgment is silent and total. A flicker of the host's eye, a half-beat of awkwardness, and the verdict is filed away without a word. You're left to read the room through micro-expressions, performing confidence you don't feel, hoping you've struck the right note in a song nobody ever taught you. It's the original networking event, except the stakes are your entire reputation and there's no name tag to hide behind. And then there's the smile. You arrive with it, you greet your hosts with it, and you will not be permitted to take it off. For the rest of the evening, through the small talk, the procession, the endless courses, the heat, and the slow crushing of your ribs, you must maintain an expression of pleasant, untroubled enjoyment. Genuine feeling is messy and therefore unwelcome. If you're bored, you smile. If you're in pain, you smile. If the person beside you is dull enough to stop a clock, you smile. The face you wear is a mask of contentment, and the mask does not come off in company, ever. So you stand there, freshly announced, freshly greeted, your cheeks already beginning their long shift, and you feel the full strangeness of it. You've been welcomed warmly into a room where every gesture is weighed and every expression is currency. You've passed the greeting, you've held the smile, and now you must drift into the gathering and make conversation with strangers about absolutely nothing of consequence, which, it turns out, is one of the hardest things this evening will ask of you. Before anyone is allowed near food, everyone gathers in the drawing room for the pre-dinner mingle, which sounds pleasant and is in fact a delicate test of nerve. Here you make conversation with people you may have just met, on topics carefully chosen to be utterly inoffensive. The weather is reliable. A recent concert is acceptable. Anything interesting is forbidden. You must appear engaged, witty, but not too witty, and above all, you must never linger too long with one person or appear to be avoiding another. It's speed dating with higher stakes and worse ventilation, and it's only the warm-up act. The drawing room itself is a stage dressed for the occasion. Lamps glowing, fire burning low, every surface arranged just so, the air thick with perfume and the low murmur of polite voices. You hold a glass you barely drink from, mostly so your hands have something to do, and you move through the room like a small boat through a crowded harbour, exchanging a few careful sentences here, a few there. The goal is to seem warm and at ease while actually operating under a strict set of rules you must never appear to be following. Topic selection is where most people quietly sink. You may discuss the weather, which is endlessly safe and endlessly dull. You may mention a concert, a play, a bit of art, a pleasant journey. You may compliment the host's home in general, agreeable terms. What you may not do is touch anything with an edge. No politics, no religion, no money, no illness, no scandal, nothing that might provoke a real opinion, or, worse, a real disagreement. The entire art of it is to talk a great deal while saying nothing that anyone could possibly take issue with, like filling several minutes of airtime with weather and traffic because the actual news is too dangerous to mention. The wit problem is its own little trap. You want to be charming, because a dull guest is a forgotten guest. But you must not be too clever, too sharp, too funny, because cleverness can curdle into showing off, and showing off suggests you're trying, and trying is unseemly. The ideal is a light, pleasant agreeableness, a gentle warmth that makes people feel comfortable without ever drawing too much attention to yourself. You're aiming to be the conversational equivalent of a well-made cushion, soft, supportive, and instantly forgotten. Then there's the choreography of movement, which is brutal in its precision. You cannot park yourself beside one person for the whole gathering, because that suggests favoritism, or worse, that you found refuge and are clinging to it. But you also cannot be seen pointedly avoiding anyone, because that's a snub, and snubs travel. So you circulate gracefully, breaking off conversations at the right moment, and drifting to the next with apparent ease, all while tracking who you've spoken to, who you haven't, and who you absolutely must acknowledge before the evening tips into rudeness. It's social arithmetic performed in real time, on your feet, while smiling. And underneath it all, the clock is ticking toward dinner, and a quieter game is being played around you that you can't fully see. The host watching, gauging, deciding the final shape of the evening. The mingle isn't just filler, it's the last loose moment before the rigid machinery of the meal locks into place. You make your pleasant noises, you nod at the weather, you laugh lightly at a mild remark, and you try to appear as though this is the most natural thing in the world. It is not. It's a high-wire act disguised as chit-chat, and you've only just begun, because soon someone will steer you toward a stranger and formally introduce you, and getting that wrong is its own special disaster. While you're nodding through the weather, a deeper game is unfolding. Who gets introduced to whom, and in what order? Introductions in this world are loaded with rank. You don't simply meet people, you're formally presented, with the lower status person presented to the higher, never the other way around. Get this backwards and you've quietly insulted someone important by treating them as your equal, which they very much are not. So you stand there, watching the host steer guests together like a chess player, and you pray that when your turn comes, you bow to the right person in the right direction at the right moment. The principle sounds straightforward until you try to apply it under pressure. The rule is that the person of lesser standing is presented to the person of greater standing as a sign of deference, like bringing a junior employee over to meet the visiting director rather than the other way around. A gentleman is presented to a lady. A younger or less distinguished person is presented to an older or grander one. The grander party is in effect being given the courtesy of choosing to acknowledge the lesser. Reverse the order, and you've upended the whole hierarchy in a single clumsy sentence, suggesting either ignorance or worse, a quiet claim to a rank you don't hold. The trouble is that you must first know everyone's rank, and rank in this world is a tangled web of title, lineage, wealth, age, and reputation, none of it printed helpfully on anyone's lapel. You're expected to read it from context, from how people are addressed, from where they stand, from the deference others show them. Misjudge it, treat a person of consequence too casually, or fuss over someone of modest standing as though they're the guest of honour, and you've revealed that you can't read the room you're standing in. It's like walking into an office and instantly being expected to know the entire org chart, except the org chart is invisible, and everyone judges you for not having memorized it. Mercifully, you rarely introduce yourself. That would be presumptuous. Instead, a third party, often the host or a mutual acquaintance, performs the introduction, steering you toward the right people in the right sequence. This is a relief and a fresh source of dread all at once, because it means your fate is in someone else's hands. You wait to be brought forward, you respond correctly when you are, and you absolutely do not go barging up to strangers to announce yourself like an overeager salesman. To do so would mark you as forward, and forward is a quietly damning word in these circles. When your moment comes, the physical performance must be flawless, the right degree of bow, the right words of acknowledgement measured and polite, the correct attention paid to the more senior party. You don't grip hands too long, you don't speak too loudly, you don't unleash your full personality on someone you've known for 4 seconds. You offer a contained, gracious greeting and let the more important person set the tone. Everything about it says, I know my place, and I know yours, and I respect the difference. It seems like an absurd amount of ceremony just to learn someone's name, and it is. But every bow and every careful word is reinforcing the invisible order of the room, reminding everyone present of exactly where they stand in relation to everyone else. You navigate it as best you can, presented and presenting in the proper sequence, and just as you begin to feel you've survived it, the host makes a quiet announcement that the next ordeal has arrived. You're about to be paired off for dinner, and you will have no say in the matter whatsoever. Just when the small talk reaches peak tedium, the real machinery clicks into place. You're assigned a dinner partner. You don't choose this person. The host chooses for you, weeks in advance, based on a careful calculation of rank, age, and who absolutely cannot be seated together. A gentleman is told which lady he will take in to dinner, and from that moment she is his responsibility for the entire meal. You might be paired with a fascinating stranger. You might be paired with someone who hates you, or worse, someone deeply boring. Either way, there's no swapping, no escape, and no refunds. The pairing is not casual matchmaking. It's a calculated act of social engineering carried out long before you arrived. A skilled hostess plans her table like a general plans a campaign, weighing every guest's rank against every other's, ensuring no two enemies sit too close, no two bores cancel each other out, and the all-important order of precedence flows correctly from the head of the table down. You're not a person in this calculation so much as a piece to be placed, slotted into a seat, and a partnership that serves the balance of the whole. Your preferences were never consulted. Your preferences are, frankly, none of the table's business. For the gentleman, the assignment comes with duty attached. You're told which lady you'll escort, and once you have her, you're bound to her for the duration. You offer your arm, you walk her in, you see to her comfort, you converse with her, you make sure her glass is attended to and her needs are met. She is your charge for the evening, whether the two of you have anything in common, or whether you'd both rather be anywhere else. It's a bit like being assigned a partner for a long formal project you didn't ask to join, except the project is dinner, and quitting is not an option. And here is where fate reveals its sense of humour. You might draw a delightful companion, someone sharp and warm and easy to talk to, and spend the meal pleasantly surprised. Or you might be matched with someone who finds you tedious, or whom you find tedious, and now you're locked together for hours of careful conversation neither of you wants. Worst of all is the truly dull partner, the one whose remarks land like dropped cutlery, leaving long silences you must scramble to fill with yet more weather. You can't get up. You can't drift away. You can't politely excuse yourself and circulate as you did in the drawing room. You're seated, paired, and committed. The lady's position is, in many ways, even more constrained. She doesn't choose her escort either, and she has even less freedom to redirect the evening if the match is poor. She is expected to be gracious, engaged, and pleasant to whoever has been assigned to her, no matter how the conversation limps along. Both parties are performing contentment with an arrangement they had no hand in, which is the recurring theme of the entire night. Smile, comply, and pretend this was exactly what you wanted. There's no mechanism for correction either. You can't lean over to the hostess and quietly request a different seatmate. To do so would be unthinkably rude, an insult to her careful planning, and to your assigned partner both. The match is the match. You shake off your disappointment or your relief. You compose your features into the familiar pleasant mask, and you prepare to make the best of whoever fate and the seating chart have handed you. Because the doors to the dining room are about to open, and the next thing you must do is walk in beside this person, in precise order, in front of everyone, without putting a single foot wrong. The doors open, dinner is announced, and now everyone must walk in. Simply strolling to the table would be far too easy. Instead, the guests form a strict procession, arranged by precedence, each gentleman offering his arm to his assigned lady, and the whole party flowing into the dining room in a precise pecking order. The host leads with the highest-ranking lady. You, somewhere in the middle, shuffle along arm in arm with a near stranger, trying not to step on a gown or trip on the carpet. It's a parade, a ranking, and a public statement of exactly where you sit in the social order, all in one short walk. The order is everything. The procession isn't a loose drift toward food, it's a carefully ranked column, and your position in it announces your standing to everyone present. The host goes first, escorting the most distinguished lady in the room, and the rest follow in descending order of importance, pair by pair, down to the least grand guests bringing up the rear. To be near the front is a quiet honour. To be near the back is a quiet message. And because everyone can see the line forming, everyone can see precisely where you've been placed, which means the walk itself is a public scoreboard of your worth. You take your assigned lady's arm, or offer yours to be taken, and the two of you fall into your appointed spot in the column. There's an etiquette even to this small gesture, the way the arm is offered, the side you stand on, the gentle, unhurried pace you must keep. You don't rush, you don't lag, you don't break formation. You move at the stately speed of the whole procession, matching the rhythm of the pairs ahead and behind, like a slow, dignified conga line where any misstep is mortifying and the music is replaced by murmured pleasantries. The hazards are surprisingly physical. The ladies' gowns are long, trailing and easily trodden on, and a single careless step can yank a hem, stumble a partner, or pull the whole graceful effect into chaos. The corridors and doorways must be navigated in pairs, which is its own small geometry problem when the fabric is wide and the passage is narrow. You're concentrating hard on not catching a heel, not crowding the couple in front, not letting your arm go stiff or limp, all while maintaining light conversation and that unkillable pleasant smile. It is a remarkable amount of focus to spend on the simple act of walking to a table. And the conversation continues throughout, because of course it does. You can't walk in silence beside your partner. That would be cold and awkward. So you murmur something agreeable as you go, a light remark about the room, the evening, anything safe, keeping the gentle hum of pleasantness alive, even as you concentrate on not disgracing yourself. It's multitasking of the most genteel and exhausting kind. Walk correctly, hold your partner correctly, speak charmingly, and project effortless ease, all in the space of a short hallway. Then you arrive, and the procession delivers each pair to their place at the table in the order they entered, the ranking translated directly into who sits where. The grand walk was never really about getting to dinner. The food was always just on the other side of the door. It was about display, about making the hierarchy visible, about reminding every guest of their exact place in the order of things before a single bite is served. You reach your chair, your partner beside you, slightly winded from the effort of walking impressively, and you finally get your first proper look at what awaits you on the table. And that somehow is the most intimidating sight of the entire evening. You reach the dining room, and the seating has of course already been decided down to the inch. There are no casual sit wherever you like gestures here. Place cards or the host's whispered direction tell you exactly where to go, and your spot is a coded message about your importance. The closer to the host, the grander you are. The further down, the more you should reflect on your life choices. You settle into your chair, your dinner partner beside you, and you finally get your first proper look at the table, which is when a fresh wave of dread arrives. The geography of the table is a map of the room's hierarchy, and everyone can read it at a glance. The host and hostess anchor the two ends, and the most distinguished guests are placed nearest to them, radiating outward in slowly diminishing importance toward the middle. To be seated at the right hand of the hostess is a genuine honour. To find yourself marooned somewhere in the lower middle is a polite way of being told where you stand. It's the 1870s version of checking whether you've been put at the head table or banished to the one by the kitchen door at a wedding. You don't choose your seat, and you certainly don't drift toward a spot that looks appealing. You're directed, either by a small card bearing your name or by a host quietly steering you into place, and you go where you're told without comment or visible reaction. Showing any flicker of disappointment at a humble placement would be unthinkable, and angling for a better one would be social suicide. You accept your seat with the same serene, pleasant expression you've been wearing since you walked through the door, even if that seat is a quiet verdict on your standing. There's a strict logic to who sits beside whom too. Ladies and gentlemen are alternated around the table, never clustered by sex so that conversation flows in the prescribed pattern, and no awkward all-male or all-female pockets form. Your assigned partner is on one side, some other carefully chosen guest is on the other. None of it is accidental. The hostess agonized over this arrangement, balancing rank and temperament and old grudges, and the result is a table where every chair has been weighed and assigned with the seriousness of a treaty negotiation. Then you actually sit, and even that has rules. You wait for the ladies to be seated first, you assist the lady beside you with her chair, you lower yourself into your own place without scraping or fussing, and you arrange yourself into the upright posture the corset has already chosen for you. You do not flop, you do not sprawl. You ease into your seat as though sitting were a refined skill, which, in this room, it apparently is. The whole manoeuvre is performed quietly, smoothly, and in coordination with everyone else, like a slow, synchronized routine no one rehearsed, but everyone somehow knows. And once you're settled, the table itself comes into focus, and your stomach drops. Spread before you is a glittering, bewildering array of silver, glass, and porcelain, more equipment than you've ever been asked to operate at a single meal. You've survived the invitation, the dressing, the arrival, the greeting, the mingle, the introductions, the pairing, and the procession, all to arrive at the true test. You're in your assigned seat, the message of your status delivered, and now you must figure out how to actually eat in this place without revealing, in the first 30 seconds, that you have no idea what any of these objects are for. Before you sits the single most intimidating sight of the evening, your place setting. Forks to the left, knives and spoons to the right, more utensils above your plate for reasons no sane person fully understands, and a regiment of glasses fanned out for the various wines to come. There may be a dozen pieces or more, each one designed for a specific food you haven't seen yet. The terrifying rule is simple in theory and agonizing in practice. Work from the outside in. Get it wrong, and a watchful neighbour will notice. Say nothing, and remember it forever. No pressure. Take a slow look at what's arrayed in front of you, because there's a lot of it. To the left, a row of forks of varying sizes, each meant for a different course. To the right, knives with their blades turned inward toward the plate, and spoons lined up beside them. Above the plate, smaller implements perched horizontally, often reserved for dessert, waiting patiently to ambush you later. And fanning out to the upper right, a small constellation of glasses, one for each wine that will arrive over the course of the meal. It's less a place setting and more a tray of surgical instruments, and you're expected to wield them all flawlessly. The guiding principle, the one mercy in all this, is to work from the outside in. The outermost fork and knife are for the first course, the next pair in for the course after that, and so on, marching steadily toward your plate as the meal progresses. In theory, if you simply start at the edges and move inward with each new dish, the cutlery itself will guide you through the evening like a row of little signposts. In practice, your hands are nervous, the table is busy, plates are arriving and vanishing, and the calm logic of outside in has a way of evaporating the moment you actually need it. What makes it genuinely cruel is the sheer specialization. This isn't a fork and a spoon doing honest general work. There are implements for fish, for meat, for dessert, for fruit, possibly little tools for things you've never encountered. Each has a correct use, and using the wrong one, spearing your fish with a meat fork, attacking your dessert with a dinner implement, broadcasts your inexperience to anyone paying attention. And in this room, everyone is paying attention. It's the dinner table equivalent of being handed a cockpit full of switches and told to fly, with no labels and a cabin full of seasoned pilots watching to see if you panic. The glasses are their own quiet trap. You don't choose which one to fill. A servant manages the wine. But you must know which glass goes with which pour, must not reach for the wrong one, and must keep track as they're used and cleared. The fan of glassware to your right looks elegant and faintly menacing, like a row of crystal sentries reporting on your every move. One confident grab for the wrong vessel and you fumble the simplest part of the meal in full view of the table. So you sit before this gleaming armoury, taking it in, the candlelight catching every polished edge, and you feel the full absurdity of it. You came here to eat dinner and instead you've been handed an examination in tableware you never studied for. The rule is outside in, you remind yourself. Start at the edges, stay calm, and whatever you do before you touch a single fork, deal with a small folded square of linen sitting in front of you. Because even the napkin, it turns out, is waiting to catch you out. Even the napkin is a trap. You'd think a folded square of linen would be beyond the reach of social judgment, but you'd be underestimating the Victorians. You wait, you watch the hostess, and only when she lifts her napkin do you dare touch yours. You unfold it part way, never with a dramatic flourish, and you lay it across your lap, never tucked into your collar like a child at seaside cafe. Dab, never wipe. And whatever you do, when you eventually leave the table, you leave it loosely beside your plate, never refolded, because refolding implies you'd happily reuse it, and that somehow is appalling. It begins with timing, because of course it does. You do not snatch up your napkin the moment you sit down, eager and obvious. You wait. You watch the hostess, who sets the rhythm for the entire table, and only when she takes her napkin do you follow. This small delay is its own little test of attentiveness, a sign that you understand your place in the room's quiet choreography. Reach for it too soon and you've jumped the gun. Ignore it too long and you look lost. So you keep one eye on the head of the table and move when she moves, like following the lead dancer so you don't start the routine on the wrong beat. Then comes the unfolding, which must be done with restraint. You don't shake the napkin open with a grand snap of the wrist as though performing a magic trick. You unfold it part way, quietly, under the edge of the table and settle it across your lap. A large napkin is only half opened. A smaller one may be opened fully, but always with the same understated calm. There's no flourish, no display, nothing that draws the eye. The napkin is meant to do its work invisibly, and any theatrical handling of it marks you as someone trying too hard, and under no circumstances do you tuck it into your collar. This is the move of a child, a labourer at a chop house, a man who fears for his shirt front and doesn't mind saying so. At a proper table, the napkin lives in your lap, full stop. Bibbing yourself with it is the kind of homely, practical gesture that has no place among people performing effortless refinement, even though, frankly, with the rich sauces and trembling jellies headed your way, a bib is exactly what common sense would recommend. Common sense, you're learning, has been left at the door along with your coat. Its use mid-meal is governed too. You dab, gently, at the corners of your mouth. You do not wipe, scrub, or mop. The napkin touches your lips with the lightest possible contact, a discreet little press rather than a vigorous clean-up. Anything more vigorous suggests a messiness you're not supposed to have, a hint that you've gotten food where food shouldn't be. The whole performance assumes you're eating so delicately that the napkin is barely needed at all, a polite fiction everyone agrees to maintain. The final indignity comes at the end, when you rise. You do not refold your napkin into a neat square. To do so would suggest you expect it to be used again by you or anyone, which carries an unpleasant whiff of thrift and reuse that genteel diners pretend never to think about. Instead, you lay it loosely, casually beside your plate, a small crumpled heap that signals the meal is done, and the linen will naturally be whisked away and laundered. So you've mastered the napkin. Wait, unfold quietly, lap not collar, dab not wipe, leave it rumpled. A square of cloth, and already 5 ways to fail, and the food hasn't even arrived. At last, food. The first course is usually soup, and you might think soup is impossible to get wrong. The Victorians disagree. You spoon away from yourself, not toward, scooping the soup outward across the bowl in a motion that defies every hungry instinct you have. You sip silently from the side of the spoon, never the tip, and absolutely never with a slurp, because a slurp in this room lands like a gunshot. When the bowl runs low, you tilt it away from you, gently, and you never ever lift it to your lips. It's a lot of rules for warm liquid, and it's only course one of many. The soup arrives, steaming gently, fragrant, possibly a clear consommé or a richer, thicker offering, and your hungry body wants nothing more than to dig in. You may not. First, you must take up the correct spoon, the large rounded one from the outermost position on your right, and you must hold it properly, neither clutched in a fist nor pinched too daintily. Then comes the strange counterintuitive motion that trips up nearly everyone. You push the spoon away from yourself, scooping the soup toward the far rim of the bowl rather than dragging it toward you, the way every instinct and every previous bowl of soup in your life has taught you to. Why away from you? The polite explanation is that it reduces the risk of spilling soup down your front, sending the spoon's drips back into the bowl rather than onto your lap as you lift it. The real reason is simply that this is how it's done, and how it's done needs no justification in this world. You move the spoon outward, gather a modest amount and bring it to your mouth in a smooth horizontal motion. It feels backward, awkward, faintly ridiculous, and you must perform it as though it's the most natural thing in the world, like being told the obviously wrong way to do something is actually the right way, and being expected to just accept it. Then there's the matter of getting the soup into your mouth, which has its own etiquette. You sip from the side of the spoon, the long edge, rather than jamming the tip between your lips. You bring the spoon to your mouth, not your mouth down to the spoon. Leaning over your bowl to meet it halfway is the posture of a tired man at a tavern, not a guest at a refined table. And the soup goes in silently. No slurping, no sucking, no audible appreciation of any kind. In the hushed, candle-lit quiet of the dining room, a single wet slurp would echo like a thunderclap, and every pleasant mask at the table would twitch. The endgame of the bowl is its own little crisis. As the soup runs low, you cannot tilt the bowl toward you and chase the last spoonfuls. That's grasping, undignified, the behaviour of someone who fears this is their only meal. If you tilt at all, you tilt the bowl gently away from you, easing the remaining liquid toward the far side where the spoon can reach it. Better still, you simply leave a little behind. Scraping a bowl clean, however satisfying, signals a hunger you're meant to pretend you don't have. You're here to dine, not to feed, and dining means leaving some soup in the bowl on principle. So you navigate the soup, spoon pushing outward, sipping from the side, silent as a held breath, leaving a polite remainder as the bowl is whisked away. You've survived the first course, the simplest course, the one you thought couldn't possibly be hard. Your spoon is cleared, a fresh challenge slides into its place, and the servant returns with the next test on a clean plate, because the fish has arrived, and the fish naturally comes armed with weaponry all its own. Just as you've survived the soup, the plates vanish and the fish arrives, complete with its own dedicated cutlery. Yes, fish gets its own special fork and a curiously shaped fish knife, because using a regular knife on fish was considered slightly barbaric. You navigate delicate bones, separate flesh from skeleton without appearing to struggle, and you do it all while maintaining light conversation and impeccable posture. Drop a bone, make a mess, or reach for the wrong implement, and you've revealed yourself as an amateur. The fish, meanwhile, judges you silently from the plate, as fish tend to do. First, the tools. Because the fish course introduces a fresh pair of strangers to your hands. There is the fish knife, a broad, blunt, oddly shaped blade that looks more like a small trowel than a proper knife, and the fish fork, slightly different from its dinner cousin. The blunt knife is the whole point. A sharp blade was thought unnecessary and even crude for fish, whose tender flesh should yield without sawing. So you're handed an implement designed to look distinctive, precisely so that everyone knows you know it's the fish knife. It's a tool whose main job is to prove you own the right tool, which is about as Victorian as an object can get. You reach for these, of course, from the correct position in your cutlery lineup, working inward from the soup spoon you just retired. Pick up a regular dinner knife to tackle your fish, and you've committed a small but visible blunder. The kind a sharp-eyed neighbour will clock instantly and file away. The whole system rewards memory and punishes hesitation, and the fish course is one of its trickier exams because the specialised cutlery is unfamiliar and the food itself is fussy. And the food is fussy. Fish means bones, those fine, treacherous little bones that hide in the flesh and threaten your composure. You must separate meat from skeleton delicately, easing the flesh away with your blunt knife and fork, lifting out any bones with quiet care, and you must do all of this without appearing to work at it. Struggling visibly with your fish, hacking at it, making a small frustrated production of it, betrays you. The performance demands that even this fiddly, bone-laced task look graceful and untroubled, as though deboning a fish in formal dress were the most natural thing in the world. The genuine hazard, of course, is the bone that escapes you, the one you don't catch, that ends up in your mouth. Now you face a delicate problem with its own rules, removing it discreetly without drama, without spitting or grimacing or alerting the table to your difficulty. There are quiet, mannerly ways to handle such a thing, all of them requiring a calm you may not feel. It's a bit like realizing mid-conversation that something is stuck in your teeth at an important meeting, except you must resolve it silently, instantly, and without anyone noticing you had a problem at all. All the while, the conversation continues and the posture holds. You can't fall silent and hunch over your plate to concentrate on the fish. You must keep up your share of pleasant talk with the partner beside you, sit upright in your whalebone cage, and operate the unfamiliar cutlery all at once. It's a juggling act of mouth, hands, and spine, performed with a serene expression that suggests none of it is the least bit difficult. So you ease through the fish, blunt knife working, bones managed, smile intact, and the plate is cleared at last. You take a breath, or as much of one as you can manage, and notice the small army of glasses to your right, because the wine, like everything else tonight, has rules of its own. Let's address the small forest of glassware in front of you, because Victorian dining took drinking very seriously and very specifically. Each wine has its own glass, and each course has its own wine, poured by an attentive servant who appears at your shoulder like a polite ghost. Sherry with the soup, white with the fish, claret or champagne as the meal climbs onward. You don't pour for yourself, you don't refuse too obviously, and you certainly don't drink too quickly, because a flushed, chatty guest is a guest the whole table will discuss tomorrow. Hydration, it turns out, is a performance. The pairing of wine to course is a fixed progression, a kind of liquid itinerary that runs alongside the food. A dry sherry or Madeira tends to accompany the soup. A white wine joins the fish. As the meal advances into its heartier courses, the reds appear, claret and the like, and champagne flows at the appropriate moments, often well into the meal rather than only at the start. Each pairing has its logic, refined over generations of people with strong opinions about what should be drunk alongside what. You're not expected to debate it, you're expected to know it, or at least to follow along without visible confusion. The pouring is handled for you, which is both a relief and a quiet surveillance system. A servant moves around the table, filling the correct glass for each course, appearing at your shoulder, attending to your wine, and withdrawing without a word. You never reach for a bottle. You never fill your own glass or, heaven forbid, anyone else's. The wine simply arrives, in the proper glass, at the proper moment, managed by staff trained to anticipate the meal's rhythm. It's a bit like having someone refill your water at a restaurant, except it's several different wines, in several different glasses, and the timing is a matter of etiquette rather than thirst. Your glasses, that little crystal constellation to your upper right, correspond to these pours, and you must use the right one. Reaching for the wrong glass, sipping your sherry from the claret vessel, is a small fumble but a visible one. As the courses progress and glasses are used and cleared, you keep loose track of which is which, lifting the correct one when the moment calls for it. It sounds simple until you're several courses deep, mildly lightheaded, and faced with a row of similar stems all catching the candlelight. The truly important rule, though, governs how much you drink and how it shows. You may have wine with each course, but you sip, you pace. You do not drain glasses with enthusiasm. Becoming visibly merry, flushed, loud, overly talkative is a serious lapse. A guest who's clearly had too much becomes the entertainment in the worst way, the subject of raised eyebrows tonight and pointed conversation tomorrow. The wine is generous, the glasses are many, and yet you must move through them all with measured restraint, like attending an open bar at a work function, where everyone is technically free to drink and everyone is absolutely keeping count. So you sip slowly from the correct glass, letting the servant manage the pause, declining nothing too pointedly and accepting nothing too eagerly, performing the role of someone who enjoys wine without ever being affected by it. It's one more layer of control laid over an evening already thick with them. You set your glass down, careful and composed, and just as you found the rhythm of the wine, you realize how many courses still stretch ahead of you, an endless procession of dishes marching toward your already straining corset with no end in sight. By now you may be wondering how many courses are coming. The answer is more than you can imagine, and then a few extra. Victorian dinners, served in the new fashionable style where dishes arrive one after another, could stretch to 8, 10, or even more courses, each appearing, being eaten, and disappearing in a steady, relentless rhythm. Soup, fish, entrees, the great roasted joint, game, sweet dishes, ices, and finally fruit. You'll be eating for hours. You'll be full after course 3. And you'll keep going anyway, because stopping is not an option, and the corset has already made its feelings known. The structure of this marathon follows the fashionable service of the day, where courses are brought out in sequence rather than all crowding the table at once. Each dish is presented, served, eaten and cleared before the next arrives, which gives the meal its stately, unhurried, faintly punishing pace. The kitchen and the staff work in careful relay to keep this procession flowing, plate after plate, course after course, so that the table is never empty and you're never quite finished. It's the original tasting menu, except no one warned you it was a tasting menu, and the portions aren't always tasting sized. The progression itself is a journey through the animal kingdom and the kitchen's ambitions. After the soup and the fish you've already faced, the entrees arrive. smaller made dishes of meat or poultry in rich sauces. Then comes the great roast, the substantial joint of meat that anchors the meal. Game may follow, birds or other quarry of the season. Then the sweet dishes begin, puddings and creams and elaborate confections, followed perhaps by ices, and finally the fruit and nuts of the dessert course. Each stage is its own little world, with its own flavours, its own cutlery, and its own fresh opportunity to slip up. The cruelty of it reveals itself somewhere around the middle. You arrived hungry, you ate the soup and the fish with genuine appetite, and now, several courses in, your body is sending increasingly urgent signals that it has had enough. But the parade does not care about your appetite. More plates are coming, and each one must be received graciously, sampled politely, and engaged with as though you're delighted to see it. You cannot simply wave a course away because you're full. Declining too much too obviously reflects poorly on the hosts and on you. So you press on, taking modest portions, eating past comfort, a soldier in a campaign of endless food. And remember what you're wearing. The corset that made breathing optional several hours ago is now contending with course after course of rich, heavy fare packed into a torso as deliberately compressed. Each new dish settles into a space that has less and less room to offer. The discomfort builds quietly, course by course, until eating becomes less a pleasure and more a feat of endurance. A slow physical negotiation between your fashionable silhouette and the relentless generosity of the kitchen. It's the 1870s version of loosening your belt under the table at a holiday feast, except you can't, because there's no belt to loosen, only whalebone that does not negotiate. So the parade marches on, plate following plate, the candlelight glinting off each fresh course as it arrives, and the cleared dishes vanishing into the hands of the staff. You eat, you pace yourself, you maintain your pleasant expression through the rising tide of food and the tightening squeeze of your stays. There is no finish line in sight, only the next course and the next. And looming among all this abundance is the question you've been politely avoiding since the meal began. What exactly is some of this food? Because a few of these dishes are wobbling at you in a way that demands an explanation. Let's actually look at what's on these plates, because Victorian cuisine had a deep and abiding love of things that wobble. Aspic, which is meat or fish suspended in shimmering savoury jelly, appears with alarming frequency. Elaborate moulded creations tremble on platters. There are rich sauces, heavily spiced game, and the occasional dish built more for spectacle than for flavour. Everything is dense, everything is decorated, and much of it is designed to impress the eye long before it troubles the stomach. You smile, you take a polite portion, and you brace yourself, because refusing food outright is its own small insult. Aspic deserves your attention first, because it is everywhere and it is unsettling. This is the art of suspending things, cooked meat, fish, eggs, vegetables, inside a clear, quivering, savoury jelly made from stock, then chilling it into a glistening, translucent dome. The Victorians adored it. To them it was elegant, clever, a triumph of the kitchen's skill. To your modern instincts it is a slab of cold meat trapped in trembling gelatin, a dish that jiggles when the platter is set down and stares back at you with whatever it has encased. You take a portion. You arrange your face into appreciation. You do not voice the obvious question. Beyond the aspic lies a whole world of moulded, decorated architectural food. Victorian cooks loved to shape and ornament their dishes, building creations that were as much sculpture as supper, towering, layered, garnished within an inch of their lives. The goal, often, was display. A dish that announced the wealth and skill of the household, that impressed the table before anyone tasted a bite. Presentation could matter as much as flavour, sometimes more, and so you're served things that look magnificent in taste, occasionally like an afterthought. It's the original triumph of plating over palate, a beautiful dish photographed in the mind and quietly endured in the mouth. The flavours themselves can be a challenge for the modern tongue. Rich, heavy sauces blanket much of the meal. Game arrives strongly flavoured, sometimes deliberately aged to a taste that takes some getting used to. Spices and seasonings are deployed with a confidence that doesn't always align with what you'd choose. Some dishes are genuinely delicious. Others are acquired tastes you've not had the years required to acquire. And there may be offerings, certain cuts, certain preparations, certain parts of certain animals that a modern guest would rather not examine too closely, served with total seriousness as delicacies. And here's the bind. You can't simply refuse. Declining a dish outright, pushing it away, making a face, or asking what on earth it is, would insult the hosts who laboured to provide this abundance and the cook who built these trembling monuments. The polite path is to accept a modest portion of whatever is offered, to taste it, to engage with it pleasantly, and to keep any reservations entirely to yourself. You're a guest, and a guest eats what is set before them with apparent gratitude, even when before them is a dome of jelly with a whole fish suspended inside like a prehistoric insect in amber. So you take your small portion, you lift the correct fork, and you sample the wobbling, glistening, richly sauced fare with an expression of serene enjoyment you have spent the entire evening perfecting. You praise it if asked. You finish enough to be polite, and you tuck your private horror away beneath the smile, because complaining is unthinkable, and curiosity is rude. The food, like everything else tonight, is something to be survived gracefully. And speaking of surviving gracefully, with every new dish comes that nagging, recurring question, the one that has haunted you since you sat down. Which fork is this one supposed to be? Back to the cutlery, because it never truly leaves you. With every new course, a fresh decision arrives. Which implement now? The rule of working from the outside in helps, but the table is a moving target, with utensils removed and replaced, and new strange tools appearing for things like asparagus or fruit. You watch your neighbours out of the corner of your eye, you commit gently to a choice, and you proceed with the confidence of someone who absolutely is not panicking inside. Choosing wrong won't kill you. It will simply mark you quietly and permanently as someone who doesn't belong. The outside-in rule remains your faithful guide, the one piece of logic holding back the chaos. In principle, each course calls for the next implement inward from where you started, so the cutlery itself counts down the meal for you, course by course, fork by fork. If everything stayed still and orderly, you could simply trust the system and glide through the evening on autopilot. But everything does not stay still. The table is alive with motion, dishes arriving and departing, and the neat logic of the lineup gets complicated by the constant traffic of service. That's the part that unravels the calm. Utensils are cleared and replaced as the meal moves along. A used fork vanishes with its plate. A fresh implement appears for a new course. The tidy row you memorized at the start is gradually rearranged by unseen hands throughout the night. So you can't simply commit the original layout to memory and coast. You have to stay alert, tracking what's been taken, what's been added, and what the current dish requires, all while keeping up conversation and posture and that ever-present smile. It's like trying to follow instructions that keep quietly editing themselves while you're not looking. Then come the specialists, the strange little tools that ambush you for particular foods. There may be an implement for asparagus, a special tool or specific approach for fruit, dainty little devices whose purpose isn't immediately obvious, and whose correct use is nonetheless expected. Each one is a fresh microtest. Encounter an unfamiliar tool beside an unfamiliar food, and you're suddenly improvising, hoping your guess matches the convention, aware that everyone around you seems to know exactly what to do. It's the dinner table equivalent of being handed a piece of equipment with no manual and being expected to operate it smoothly in front of experts. This is where the discreet sideways glance becomes your most valuable skill. When in genuine doubt, you watch your neighbours just for a heartbeat, just enough to see which implement they've chosen, and you follow their lead. You do this subtly, without obviously staring, without turning your uncertainty into a performance. A quick glance, a gentle commitment to the same choice, and you proceed as though you knew all along. It's quiet, it's a little cowardly, and it's the survival tactic of nearly every guest who wasn't raised at tables like these, the original strategy of copying the confident person next to you and praying they're right. And so you navigate the endless cutlery, glancing, committing, proceeding, riding the outside-in rule as far as it'll take you and improvising the rest. You won't be arrested for using the wrong fork. No one will say a word, but the watching will register it. The small wrong choice noted and remembered. Another faint mark against you in the silent ledger of the evening. You set down one implement, take up another, and keep the panic safely behind your smile. Because choosing the right tool is only half the battle. Now you have to actually use it correctly, and your entire body, it turns out, is also under strict review. While you're battling the silverware, your own body is under constant surveillance. Elbows stay off the table, always. You sit upright, never slouched, your spine doing the corset no favours. You take small bites, you chew with your mouth firmly closed, you never speak with food in it, and you pace yourself to the table so you're never the first or last to finish. Reaching across someone is forbidden. You ask politely for things to be passed. Every movement is measured, controlled, and observed. Eating, which should be the easiest thing in the world, has become an act of careful, exhausting choreography. Start with the elbows, that famous, eternal rule. They stay off the table, full stop. No leaning on them, no resting your weight forward, no settling in as though you were at your own kitchen counter. Your arms are kept close, your hands and wrists doing their work without your elbows ever planting themselves on the cloth. It seems like a trivial thing, and yet it is one of the most rigidly observed conventions of the table, drilled into proper diners from childhood, and a single forgetful elbow can draw a disapproving glance from across the room. It's the one rule even people who know nothing else about table manners somehow remember, and here it is enforced with full seriousness. Then there's the spine, and here the corset and the etiquette conspire against you. You sit upright, always, your back straight, your bearing composed, never slouching or sagging toward your plate. The corset has, of course, already made slouching nearly impossible, so in a grim way it's doing the etiquette's work for it, holding you at rigid attention whether you like it or not. But upright posture must be maintained actively too, through the long hours and the many courses, your body held in a poised, attentive line even as fatigue and a full stomach beg you to relax. You do not relax. Relaxing is for people not currently being watched. The mechanics of eating itself are governed down to the smallest motion. You take small bites, modest forkfuls that can be chewed neatly and swallowed without effort. You chew with your mouth firmly closed, silently, no smacking, no visible churning, no sound at all. You never, ever speak with food in your mouth. A question directed at you mid-bite must wait until you've quietly finished and swallowed. And you pace yourself to the rest of the table, neither bolting your food like a starving man, nor dawdling so far behind that you hold up the clearing of the course. You match the rhythm of those around you, eating in genteel synchrony. Reaching is its own forbidden act. You do not stretch across the table, or across your neighbour, to retrieve something you want. You do not lunge for the salt or grab at a dish out of your immediate reach. Instead, you ask, politely and quietly, for it to be passed to you, relying on the courtesy of others rather than the length of your arm. Reaching is grabby, intrusive, the behavior of someone focused on their own appetite rather than the smooth flow of the table. It's the original, "could you please pass the salt," elevated into an ironclad rule, because helping yourself directly is simply not done. Add it all together, the still elbows, the rigid spine, the small silent bites, the careful pacing, the polite requests, and you realize that eating in this room is a full-body performance, every motion measured and observed. You're not just feeding yourself, you're demonstrating with each controlled gesture that you belong among people who never appear to be merely hungry. You hold your posture, mind your elbows, chew in silence, and keep the choreography flawless through course after course. And the moment your body has the rules mastered, the conversation shifts beneath you, because the entire table is about to turn in unison, and you'd better be ready to turn with it. Now for one of the strangest rules of all, how you talk. Convention demands that during one course you converse with the guest on one side of you, and then, at a subtle signal led by the hostess, the entire table turns and everyone switches to the guest on their other side. It's an invisible dance performed by the whole room at once. Get caught mid-sentence on the wrong turn, and you're left talking to someone's shoulder while your assigned partner waits. So you watch, you listen, you pivot on cue, and you pray your interesting story survives being chopped neatly in half. The mechanics are simple to describe and maddening to perform. At the start of the meal, the hostess turns to speak with the gentleman on one side of her, and the whole table follows suit, each person conversing with the neighbour in the matching direction. Then, at some later point, the hostess turns the other way, to her other neighbour, and like a wave rippling down the table, everyone turns with her, abandoning one conversation to begin another. The entire room rotates its attention in unison, a synchronized social pivot that nobody announces and everybody is expected to feel coming. The catch is that the signal is silent. No bell rings, no one says, "and now we turn." You're meant to sense it, to keep half an eye on the hostess and the general drift of the table, and to make your pivot smoothly at the right moment along with everyone else. Miss the cue and you're stranded, still chatting eagerly with a neighbour who has already turned away to their other side, leaving you addressing the back of their head, while your own assigned partner sits waiting for your attention. It's like a group conversation where everyone but you somehow got the memo that the topic had changed. This is brutal on any conversation worth having. You might be midway through a genuinely engaging exchange, a story building toward its point, a discussion finding its rhythm, when the table turns and you must drop it, mid-thought, and rotate to begin fresh with the person on your other side. Your half-told tale simply dies there, unfinished, and there's no graceful way to pick it up later. This system prizes the even distribution of your attention over the quality of any single conversation, ensuring no neighbour is neglected at the cost of every interesting thing anyone was actually saying. And it means you must, over the course of the meal, sustain conversation with at least 2 different people, in 2 different directions, on 2 separate occasions, each time summoning fresh pleasant talk on safe and agreeable subjects. There's no settling into one good rapport and coasting. You give your assigned partner their due, you give your other neighbour their due, and you switch between them on the table's invisible command, like alternating attention between 2 guests at a gathering, because leaving either one ignored would be rude. It's fair in its way. It's also exhausting, requiring you to be charming on demand in stereo with a swivel built in. So you stay alert to the turn, you pivot when the table pivots, and you keep your conversation light enough to abandon at a moment's notice, and resume from nothing on the other side. You perform attentiveness in both directions, sacrificing any real momentum to the rigid fairness of the rotation. It's one more layer of controlled, observed behaviour stacked atop a meal already governed down to the elbow. And as if managing 2 conversations weren't enough, there's the small matter of what you're allowed to actually say in them, because the list of acceptable topics is shorter than you'd ever guess. With the rhythm of conversation sorted, you face the content of it, which is heavily policed. Religion is off the table. Politics is off the table. Money, illness, anything indelicate, anything that might spark genuine feeling, all banished. You're left with a narrow strip of acceptable subjects. The weather again, travel, art, the cleverness of the host's home. The goal is to be agreeable, never memorable for the wrong reasons. You must seem engaged while saying almost nothing of substance for hours. It is the social equivalent of running in place, and somehow it's considered the height of refined company. The forbidden list is long and rigidly observed. Religion is dangerous ground, capable of stirring deep conviction and deeper offence, so it's simply not discussed at table. Politics is the same, a reliable spark for the kind of heated disagreement that polite dining exists to avoid. Money is vulgar to mention directly, your own or anyone else's, and matters of business sit just as awkwardly. Illness, bodily complaints, anything unpleasant or indelicate has no place near the food. Gossip, scandal, anything that might wound someone present or absent is off limits too. By the time you tally up everything you can't say, the conversational territory has shrunk to a thin little strip. What remains is determinedly pleasant and mostly weightless. The weather, that eternal standby, returns once more. Travel makes a safe subject. Journeys taken, places seen, all kept light and free of complaint. Art, music, the theatre, a recent concert or performance offer respectable ground, provided you don't venture into anything too pointed. You may admire the host's home, the room, the evening itself, in warm general terms. These are the approved subjects, agreeable, harmless, and shared. Designed to let people talk pleasantly for hours without anyone ever feeling a thing they'd rather not. The deeper goal beneath all this is to be agreeable above all, never memorable for the wrong reasons. A guest who provokes, who argues, who says something sharp or strange or too sincere, becomes a problem, the subject of raised eyebrows and later discussion. The ideal is to be pleasant company that leaves no sting behind, warm in the moment and untroubling in memory. You aim to be remembered, if at all, as very pleasant, which is the highest praise this kind of table offers, and frankly, one of the blandest compliments a person can earn. The strange difficulty is that you must do all this while seeming genuinely engaged. You can't simply go silent or visibly bored. You're expected to participate brightly, to contribute, to keep the pleasant murmur alive, so you generate conversation, real, sustained, animated conversation, out of material that has been stripped of anything with weight or edge. You discuss the weather as though it fascinates you. You respond to a remark about a concert as though it's the most interesting thing you've heard all week. It's a performance of interest in subjects designed never to be interesting, like keeping a meeting going enthusiastically when every actual topic worth raising has been ruled out of order. So you talk and talk and talk about nothing of consequence, with apparent delight, in 2 directions, on the table's silent command, for the length of a very long meal. You stay agreeable, you avoid every pitfall, you say not one memorable thing, and you count that as success. It is, in its way, a remarkable feat of social endurance, filling hours with pleasant emptiness while never once putting a foot wrong. And the whole time you're performing this delicate nothing, you're not the only one keeping watch over your conduct, because the room is lined with people whose entire job is to see everything you do. Throughout all of this, you are not alone, even for a second. Servants line the room, footmen move silently between guests, refilling glasses, removing plates, and witnessing every small error you make. They're trained to be invisible, to anticipate needs before you voice them, and to never, ever react. But they see it all. The wrong fork, the trembling hand, the moment you nearly slurped. In a strange way, the staff knows the truth of every guest better than the guests know each other. You're performing not just for the table, but for an entire silent audience in livery, who will say nothing and forget nothing. The presence of servants is constant and considerable. A well-run dinner of this scale employs a number of staff, footmen and others, moving around the room in quiet coordination, often with a particular attention to the guests in their care. They serve the dishes, they pour the wines, they clear the plates between courses, they manage the whole physical flow of the meal, so that food and drink appear and vanish as if by magic. You're surrounded, attended, hemmed in by helpful hands, and they are close enough to observe everything that happens at the table, including everything that happens to you. Their defining skill is invisibility, the art of being everywhere and noticed nowhere. A good footman anticipates what's needed before anyone asks, refilling a glass at the right moment, clearing a plate the instant it's finished, materializing at your shoulder and withdrawing again without a word or a wasted motion. The ideal is service so smooth it seems to require no one. The room simply running itself. They're trained to keep their faces still, their movements quiet, their presence felt only as a kind of seamless ease. You're meant to barely register them, even as they manage the entire mechanics of your evening. But invisible does not mean blind. These attendants, standing close, moving constantly, miss nothing. They see the guest who reached for the wrong fork, the hand that trembled lifting the glass, the bite that nearly came with a sound, the small fumbles and hesitations that the other guests, busy with their own performances, might not catch. The staff has a clear, unhurried view of every diner's competence, and their trained stillness means none of it shows on their faces. You could commit a dozen tiny blunders and the footman refilling your wine would betray not a flicker, all while seeing each one plainly. There's something quietly unnerving in that. The guests are performing for one another, each absorbed in their own careful act, but the servants are performing too, the performance of seeing everything and revealing nothing. In their silent, watchful way, they may understand the true social fluency of each person at the table better than the guests understand each other, having watched countless dinners and learned to read a diner's ease or anxiety at a glance. It's a bit like being served by staff who could write a devastatingly accurate review of your manners and will, of course, never say a word. So you eat and talk and pivot and perform, ringed by an attentive, impassive audience that anticipates your needs and notes your missteps with equal, expressionless efficiency. You're on display not only for your fellow guests, but for the quiet professionals managing the room, who will carry their observations away with them and keep them, as they keep everything, to themselves. It's one more set of eyes in an evening already thick with watching, and as the candles burn lower and the room grows warmer with all this activity, a more elemental challenge begins to make itself felt, one that no amount of etiquette can fully control. Let's talk about the air in this room, because it's working against you too. The dining room is lit by gas lamps and dozens of candles, all burning steadily, all giving off heat. Add the warmth of a crowded table, heavy rich food, several glasses of wine, and a corset that's already restricted your breathing, and you have the perfect recipe for the famous Victorian faint. Ladies swooned with such regularity that fainting was practically scheduled. It wasn't drama, it was physics. So if the room begins to swim and the candles blur, congratulations, you're having an authentic and very fashionable experience. Consider the sources of heat all working at once. The room is lit by candles, many of them, and often gas lamps as well, each flame throwing off warmth as it burns through the long hours of the meal. The table is crowded with guests, each one a small furnace of body heat. The food is hot and rich, course after course of it, and the wine adds its own flush. There's no electric fan, no cooling system, nothing to carry the heat away. It simply builds, gathering in the closed, occupied room until the air grows thick, warm and heavy in a way that no one is permitted to acknowledge. Into this warm, stuffy environment, drop the corset. You've spent the entire evening laced into a structure that compresses your torso and limits how deeply you can breathe, and now you're sitting in a hot, airless room, working through a heavy meal, sipping wine, your body trying to digest and stay composed on a fraction of its usual air supply. The combination is genuinely punishing. Restricted breathing plus rising heat plus a full stomach plus alcohol is a recipe with a predictable result. And the result is that a fair number of guests, over the course of these long dinners, found themselves suddenly, unavoidably overwhelmed. Hence the famous Victorian faint, which was less a delicate flourish and more a simple physical inevitability. A lady feeling the room close in, her vision narrowing, her tightly laced body unable to draw the breath it needed, might genuinely swoon, slipping into a brief faint right there at the table or shortly after. It happened often enough that it became almost an expected feature of fashionable life, woven into the era's image of refined womanhood, when in truth it was frequently the straightforward consequence of heat, restriction, and exhaustion conspiring against the body. Households were prepared for it, which tells you how routine it was. Smelling salts, sharp-scented preparations meant to revive a fainting person, were kept close at hand precisely because someone might need them. A faint was managed calmly, with a kind of practiced readiness, rather than treated as a crisis. It was simply part of the landscape of these evenings, an accepted hazard of the corset and candle environment, attended to and moved past with minimal fuss. The smelling salts were the era's quiet acknowledgement that the whole fashionable apparatus was, on a warm enough night, slightly more than the human body could take. So you sit in the gathering heat, breathing in shallow sips, the candles glowing and the room growing closer, and you understand the faint not as weakness but as physics finally winning. If the flames begin to blur and the warmth presses in, and you feel yourself going light, you're simply meeting the evening's most honest challenge, the one no etiquette can rule away. You steady yourself, you breathe as best your stays allow, and you press on. And just when you think the table has exhausted its supply of small humiliations, a little bowl of water arrives at your place, and it is here to ruin the unwary completely. Toward the end of the meal, a small bowl of water arrives at your place, sometimes with a slice of lemon or a flower petal floating in it. This is a finger bowl, meant for delicately rinsing your fingertips. It is also a famous trap because, to the unaware, a bowl of pleasant lemon water looks exactly like something to drink. Lift it to your lips, and you've just announced you're inexperienced to the entire table in one tragic sip. So you dip your fingers, gently dry them on your napkin, and feel a quiet flush of triumph at having dodged one of the dinner party's most legendary humiliations. The object itself is innocent-looking enough. A small bowl, often of glass or porcelain, set at your place and filled with water, frequently scented or garnished, a slice of lemon, a petal, something pleasant floating on the surface. It arrives at a point in the meal when your fingers may have touched food, fruit especially, and it exists for one purpose, to let you rinse your fingertips clean, discreetly, at the table. A civilized little provision, really, a way to freshen up without leaving the room, and a complete disaster waiting to happen for anyone who doesn't know what it is. Because here's the trap, plain and obvious in hindsight. A small bowl of water, faintly scented, with a slice of lemon floating in it, set down in front of you toward the end of a meal, looks an awful lot like something you're meant to drink. To a guest unfamiliar with the custom, it could read as a light refreshment, a palate cleanser, a little citrus water to sip. And so the unwary, the inexperienced, the guest who came up through tables that never bothered with finger bowls might reasonably lift it toward their mouth and in that single motion reveal everything. It's the 1870s equivalent of confidently using something exactly as it was not intended in front of a room of people who all know better. The correct use is quiet and simple once you know it. You dip your fingertips, just the tips, into the water, gently, rinsing them with a small discreet motion. You don't plunge your hands in, don't splash, don't make a production of it. Then you lift them out and dry them lightly on your napkin, the same napkin that has been living in your lap all evening, returning your hands to readiness without ever drawing attention to the act. The whole thing takes seconds and should pass almost unnoticed, a brief, mannerly little rinse folded into the rhythm of the meal. But the legend of the finger bowl lives in its capacity for catastrophe, and the truly mortifying part is how public the error would be. Drinking from your finger bowl isn't a private slip you can quietly recover from. It's a visible, unmistakable announcement, performed in full view of a table primed to notice exactly this kind of thing. Everyone would see. No one would say a word, of course, because pointing it out would be its own breach. But the knowledge would settle over the table like a held breath, and you'd be marked, instantly and permanently, as someone out of their depth. So you regard the little bowl with appropriate caution. You dip your fingertips like a person who's done this 100 times. You dry them on your napkin, and you feel a small private surge of pride at having sidestepped one of the most famous traps the evening has to offer. You've made it past the finger bowl, that gleaming little test of who truly belongs. And with your fingers freshened and your composure intact, you turn to the last edible challenge of the meal, the dessert course, where even a humble piece of fruit has been engineered to test you. You've nearly made it. The final stretch brings the dessert course, often fresh fruit and nuts, which sounds gloriously simple after everything else. It is not. Fruit at a Victorian table is eaten with knife and fork, peeled and quartered with surgical precision, never gnawed at like a picnic. Grapes are snipped from the bunch with little scissors, never plucked by hand. Even an orange becomes a small performance of dexterity. By now your hands are tired, your stomach is in open rebellion, and yet you carefully, elegantly dismantle a piece of fruit, as though your reputation depends on it, because of course it does. The dessert course arrives as a kind of refined finale. Fresh fruit, nuts, perhaps elegant little sweets, presented as the gentle close to the long parade of richer dishes. After everything you've endured, the soup geometry, the fish bones, the wobbling aspic, the sight of a bowl of fruit feels almost like mercy. Fruit is simple. Fruit is what you eat with your hands on an ordinary afternoon, casually, thoughtlessly. Surely here at last is a course that asks nothing of you, and that comfortable assumption is precisely the one the table is waiting to punish. Because at a proper table you do not eat fruit with your hands. You eat it with a knife and fork, the small dessert implements that have been waiting above your plate since the beginning. An apple or a pear is peeled and cut into neat pieces, the peel removed in careful strips, the fruit quartered and managed with the cutlery rather than lifted and bitten. To pick up a whole piece of fruit and simply bite into it, the most natural thing in the world would be coarse, the manner of a picnic rather than a dinner. So you perform delicate surgery on your dessert, peeling and slicing with tired hands, turning a humble apple into an exercise in dexterity. The grapes deserve special mention, because they come with their own absurd little ritual. You do not pluck grapes from the bunch one by one with your fingers, however obvious and easy that would be. Instead, small grape scissors are provided, dainty implements meant for snipping off a modest cluster of grapes to take onto your own plate, which you then eat with appropriate care. The idea of using tiny scissors to harvest grapes at the dinner table sounds like a parody, and yet it was a genuine refinement. One more specialized tool for one more everyday food, ensuring that even eating grapes became a small test of whether you knew the proper way. By this point in the evening, the comedy of it is sharpened by your sheer exhaustion. Your hands have been operating unfamiliar cutlery for hours. Your stomach, packed past comfort and squeezed by the corset, is in open revolt against the very idea of more food. You are tired, full, light-headed from the heat and the wine, and your reward for surviving this far is to delicately peel and quarter a piece of fruit, or snip grapes with miniature scissors with the same flawless composure you've maintained all night. It's like being asked to thread a needle at the end of a marathon, a fiddly precision task demanded exactly when you have the least left to give, and yet you do it, because the watching never stops, and the standards never relax, not even at the very end. You peel, you slice, you snip, you eat your fruit as elegantly as if the entire evening's verdict rested on this final course, which, in the quiet arithmetic of the table, it partly does. You've conquered the dessert, the last edible trial of the night. The eating, blessedly, is nearly over. But the evening is not, because at a small signal from the hostess, the entire party is about to split cleanly in two, and the women are about to rise and leave the men behind. And then, at a quiet signal from the hostess, the evening splits in two. The ladies rise and withdraw together, leaving the gentlemen behind at the table. This is the great Victorian separation of the sexes, a ritual as fixed as the courses themselves. The women retreat to the drawing room for coffee, conversation, and a long-awaited chance to breathe slightly more freely. The men remain among the wreckage of dinner for a different kind of evening entirely. For a brief moment, everyone gets a small reprieve from the carefully mixed company, and the rules shift into two separate rooms with two separate sets of expectations. The signal itself is subtle, as these things always are. Toward the end of the meal, the hostess catches the eyes of the other ladies, perhaps with a small look or gesture, and rises from her seat. At this cue, all the women rise with her, and the gentlemen rise too, out of courtesy, as the ladies prepare to leave the room. There's no announcement, no explanation, just the quiet, practiced understanding that the moment has come for the party to divide. The men remain standing until the ladies have gone, and then settle back into their seats, and just like that, one dinner has become two separate gatherings. The ladies withdraw together to another room, typically the drawing room, where coffee and conversation await. This is, in a sense, the women's portion of the evening, a stretch of time spent in exclusively female company, away from the men, the formal mixed table. For all the rigidity of the custom, it carries a small mercy, a change of scene, a different and somewhat easier sociability, a chance to settle into chairs and talk among themselves without the full weight of the mixed dinner's choreography pressing down. After hours laced upright at the table, even a modest shift toward ease is welcome. The men, meanwhile, stay behind in the dining room for their own quite different interlude, which the next chapter will get into. The point of the separation, in the logic of the time, was partly that the two groups were thought to want and need different things at this stage of the evening. The men their particular pursuits, the women theirs. It reflected a whole world view about the proper spheres of men and women, expressed here as a simple matter of which room you ended up in after dessert. You didn't question it. You simply went where your sex was expected to go, like a workplace where, at a certain point in every event, the room quietly sorts itself into two familiar camps. For the guest, the withdrawal brings a genuine, if temporary, loosening of the screws. The intense, fully mixed performance of the dinner table, with its turning and its forbidden topics and its relentless watching from both sexes, gives way to something a little less exacting. The company is smaller, more uniform, the setting more relaxed, the conversation freer in its own way. You can breathe a little. You can shift in your seat. The mask doesn't come off entirely, it never does, but it's allowed to sit a touch more lightly for a while. So the ladies rise and glide from the room, the gentlemen stand and then resettle, and the single grand dinner party fractures cleanly into two parallel evenings, unfolding in two separate spaces. It's one of the most distinctive rituals of the whole affair, this orderly parting of the sexes, performed without a word of explanation, because none was ever thought necessary. The women head off to their coffee and their conversation, and the men, left alone among the cleared plates and the lingering candlelight, reach for the port and the cigars and settle in for an entirely different kind of hour. In the dining room, the gentlemen settle in for the masculine ritual of the evening. Port passed solemnly around the table, always to the left, never to be reached for greedily. Cigars are lit, the air thickens, and the conversation finally drifts toward the forbidden topics that were banned earlier. Politics, business, opinions with actual edges. It's looser here, smokier, a touch more honest, though still bound by its own rules about how the decanter travels and how much one should drink. The men linger, talk, and enjoy a freedom the mixed table never allowed, all while the ladies wait, wondering how long this will take. The centerpiece of this interlude is the port, and even relaxing has its protocol. The decanter of port is placed on the table and passed around, and there is a correct direction for its travel. To the left, always to the left, each man pouring for himself, and then passing it on to his neighbour in the proper direction. You do not reach across for it. Do not hold on to it too long. Do not disrupt its steady leftward circuit around the table. The decanter makes its dignified rounds, and you take your share when it reaches you and send it onward. A small ceremony of its own folded into the supposedly looser part of the night. Then the cigars are lit, and the room changes character. Smoke begins to gather, the air growing thick and fragrant in a way it never could while the ladies were present, and the whole atmosphere shifts towards something heavier, clubbier, more indulgent. This is a distinctly masculine stretch of the evening, defined by its smoke and its drink and its absence of women, a space where the gentlemen settle into a different mode entirely. The careful, glittering restraint of the mixed table gives way to something warmer and more comfortable, if no less governed by its own particular customs. And here at last the conversation is allowed to find some edges. The topics that were strictly forbidden at the mixed table, politics, business, matters of substance and opinion, become permissible, even expected among the men over their port and cigars. The talk can grow more serious, more frank, more genuinely engaged than the weather and travel pleasantries of dinner ever permitted. It's the part of the evening where real conversation finally becomes possible, where men say things they actually think, having spent the dinner saying nothing of consequence at all. The relief of it is palpable, a loosening of the conversational corset that bound the whole table earlier. Still, this is no free-for-all. The looseness is relative, bounded by its own conventions, the leftward port, the moderation expected even here, the particular manners of the smoking room. A gentleman who overindulged, who drank too deeply or grew too loud even in this more relaxed setting would still be noted. The freedom is real but contained, a permitted release within an evening otherwise defined by control. You enjoy the port, the cigar, the franker talk, but you remain at bottom, a man performing the role of a man at ease, which is its own kind of performance. Meanwhile, in another room entirely, the ladies are passing this same stretch of time in their own way, and there's an unspoken question hanging over the men's interlude. how long to linger before rejoining them. Stay too briefly and you've cut short a cherished ritual. Stay too long and you've left the women waiting, neglected for an unreasonable stretch. So the men enjoy their port and their smoke and their honest conversation, with one eye, however faint, on the clock, until the moment comes to stub out the cigars and rejoin the other half of the party. And when the two halves come back together, the evening enters its final, oddly performative phase. Eventually the gentlemen rejoin the ladies and the two halves of the party reunite in the drawing room for the social finale. Now comes the entertainment, which you may also be expected to provide. Someone sits at the piano, someone is gently pressured to sing. Perhaps there are cards or a parlour game, all performed with the same anxious eye on doing it correctly. Coffee or tea circulates. Conversation resumes its careful, pleasant march. You've eaten, you've survived, and now you must remain charming for one final stretch, because leaving too soon would be its own quiet insult. The reunion brings the company back together in the drawing room, the men arriving from their port and cigars to join the ladies who have been at their coffee and conversation. The mixed sociability of the early evening resumes, but in a softer, post-dinner key. Everyone settled now into the comfortable rooms beyond the dining table, the formal meal behind them. Coffee or tea makes its rounds. The atmosphere is warmer, more relaxed than the rigid choreography of dinner, though the familiar rules of pleasant, agreeable conduct never truly went anywhere. You're still performing. You're simply performing in more comfortable chairs. The defining feature of this final phase is the entertainment, and here lies a fresh little terror. You may be expected to take part. A lady might be invited to play the piano, a guest pressed gently to sing, the company gathered to listen and admire. These were accomplishments cultivated precisely for such moments. The musical and social skills a well-brought-up person was meant to display when called upon. To be asked to perform and to demur too much is awkward. To perform poorly is worse. To perform with grace is the goal. So even the after-dinner relaxation comes with the possibility of being put, quite literally on stage, expected to entertain the very people who've been judging your manners all night. Beyond music, there might be cards or parlour games, the structured amusements of the drawing room, each with its own conventions and its own opportunities for getting things subtly wrong. These diversions filled the time and gave the reunited party something to do besides talk, but they were never wholly casual. They were played with the same underlying attentiveness to proper conduct that governed everything else. Winning too eagerly, playing too carelessly, taking any of it too seriously or not seriously enough, all carried their faint risks. Even at play, you remained a person being observed, your behaviour quietly assessed. And the conversation, of course, picks up its careful, pleasant march once more. The agreeable nothings resuming in the relaxed setting of the drawing room. You've been doing this for hours now, generating warmth and engagement from harmless subjects, and you must keep it up a while longer, charming and composed, through this final stretch of the evening. The fatigue is real by now, the long performance wearing at you, the smile harder to hold than it was at the door, but hold it you must, because the evening isn't over until the proper moment to leave arrives, and that moment too is governed by rules. For leaving too soon is its own small insult, a suggestion that you couldn't wait to be gone, that the company failed to hold you. You must stay an appropriate while, participate in the entertainment, take your coffee, keep up your charm, and depart only when the timing is right. So you summon the last of your energy for this closing act, performing ease and enjoyment in the warm, lamplit drawing room while quietly longing for your carriage and your bed. You've nearly run the whole gauntlet, and when at last the proper moment to leave does arrive, you'll find that even your exit, and what follows it, has been scripted in advance. At last, the moment to leave arrives, and even this has its rules. You don't bolt for the door, but you don't overstay either. The highest-ranking guest often departs first, and the rest follow in a polite cascade. You thank your hosts with measured warmth, you gather your coat, and you escape into the night, finally able to exhale, loosen something, and feel your organs return to their original positions. But it isn't over. The next day, etiquette demands a call or a card to thank your host properly, and somewhere in that house, the evening is being quietly reviewed, every fork, every feint, every word. You survived the dinner. Surviving the verdict is another matter entirely. The timing of departure is naturally governed. You may not flee the moment you've had enough, however much your aching body and exhausted social muscles beg you to. A too early exit suggests displeasure or impatience and insults your hosts. Nor may you linger past the point where the evening is clearly wound down, becoming the guest who won't leave. There's a right moment, and often a right order, with the most distinguished guest departing first, and the rest taking their cue and following in turn, a polite cascade toward the door. You watch, you sense the shift, and you make your move when the room's rhythm allows it, exiting on cue as you've done everything else all night. The leave-taking itself is a final small ceremony. You thank your hosts, warmly but with measured restraint, expressing your pleasure at the evening in the same controlled, agreeable tones you've maintained since you arrived. You don't gush, you don't rush, you offer the proper gracious farewells, retrieve your coat and your things, and make your way out into the night. And then, at last, the carriage, the cold air, the blessed solitude, and the first genuinely deep breath you've taken in hours, your laced and rigid body finally permitted to ease, your organs, metaphorically, settling back into the places the corset displaced. The performance is over. You made it. Except you didn't, not quite, because the etiquette pursues you home. The very next day, convention demands a follow-up, a thank you, often in the form of a call or a card left at your host's home, acknowledging their hospitality with a proper formal courtesy. The evening doesn't end when you leave. It has an administrative tail, a final piece of paperwork to complete before the whole affair is properly closed. So even your gratitude is scheduled and scripted, one last correct gesture required of you, like the obligatory follow-up note after an interview, the thing you must remember to send or risk undoing all your effort. And as you compose that note, you can be quite sure of what's happening back in the house you visited. The evening is being reviewed. Your hosts, perhaps over their own breakfast, are turning the dinner over in conversation, and you, along with every other guest, are part of that review. Every fork you chose, every word you said, every moment you faltered or shone, quietly tallied and discussed. The watching that filled the dining room doesn't stop at the door. It follows you into the next day's gossip, where your performance is graded in absentia by the very people you tried so hard to please. So you sit with that knowledge, your thank you card half written, your body still recovering from its hours in the genteel pressure cooker. You navigated the invitation, the dressing, the corset, the arrival, the greeting, the introductions, the pairing, the procession, the seating, the cutlery, the courses, the conversation, the heat, the finger bowl, the withdrawal, and the departure, all without putting a foot visibly wrong, you hope. You survive the Victorian dinner party, which is no small feat. Whether you survive the verdict being delivered right now in a drawing room across town is entirely out of your hands. And so, somehow, you made it through. Think back over everything this single evening asked of you. A stiff little card that ruled your whole week. A reply written about yourself in the third person. Hours spent climbing into clothing engineered for posture rather than people. laced into a corset that quietly turned breathing into a luxury. The carefully timed arrival, the announced entrance, the frozen smile you wore from the door to the carriage, and every minute in between. The forks that multiplied like rumours, the soup you spooned the wrong way on purpose, the fish with its blunt little knife, the wine in its proper glass, the endless parade of trembling, glistening dishes you praised and could not refuse, the turning table, the forbidden words, the watchful footmen, the rising heat, the grapes you snipped with tiny scissors, and after all that, a thank you card the very next morning, while a drawing room across town quietly graded your every move. It sounds exhausting because it was, yet people lived entire lives inside these rules, learned the steps as children, and carried them with grace through evening after evening. They turned eating dinner into an art form, an endurance event, and a quiet performance of belonging, and they did it without ever letting the mask slip. That takes a strange and stubborn kind of strength, the strength to be pleasant, upright, and composed for hours, no matter what the corset or the candles or the company demanded. So tonight, as you sink into your soft bed in your loose, forgiving clothes, free